that's enough for me for a long time. I'll let each of my colleagues introduce their role, and I'll point out that one of the things that we do at the Newcomer Education Coalition is we walk in and we identify which hats we wear for our jobs, and we take them off to discuss our common concerns as humans, and we put them back on as a way to figure out how our roles in our jobs can help advance those common human concerns. It's a really neat partnership. It's also, I would be wrong to not identify that we're generously supported by CETA, which gives us the kind of organizational support to be able to meet regularly and sometimes have coffee. So we're going to talk a bit about the perspectives of newcomers. We're going to talk a bit about connecting with the community, which extends even beyond newcomer issues, but is centered in there. And we're going to talk about some emerging concerns that I think us in education need to think deeply about and maybe do something about. And then we'll make sure there's time for questions because my colleagues are not as long-winded as I am. So first, this is a proud Gordon Bell graduate and teacher, and I'll let him explain the rest of his story by himself. My colleague, Surafel Kuchum.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everybody. So, yes, as Mark said, my name is Surafel Kuchum, and I'm a teacher and an advocate for equity in education, and also a member of a Newcomer Education Coalition. I'll give you a little bit of background why what I do, and the reason behind it. I came to Canada in 2004 and 5 school year, and I went to a high school, one of the high school in the inner city, and I had a challenge going through the school system, barriers that I sat down in the classroom and reflect on, and at some point, and from many of the reasons that I decided to be a teacher is that I saw that teacher not acknowledging us coming into the classroom, and the gap of understanding of what we bring into the classroom, and teachers are too busy in making us Canadianized and acknowledging what we bring, our assets, than focusing on our deficits. So you guys hear these words thrown around many times, but I'll tell you my personal experience and how it relates to what I do. So after I finished high school, I went to U of W. I graduated from education faculty, and I decided to do a community-based education program. And right at that time, ERCOM, as an immigrant refugee community organization of Manitoba, is a transitional housing where newcomer refugees settle in Canada. We provide them their first home, and it also help them in integrating into a Canadian culture. So my role, there was a position that was opened as a teacher and school liaison for ERCOM. And I was like, this is perfect for me. I'm going to go and do. Because I felt like there was a responsibility that I have as a newcomer myself, and I've seen kids struggle through, and in what way that I could help, or in what role that I could try to bridge the gap between the education system and the newcomer community. Also, try to bring the gaps to certain level. So I took that position. So I for the last 2 years, I've been working as a teacher and school liaison for ERCOM. My position there is running a homework program, which we continued what the teachers do in the school with our youth. I'll try to continue that in the ERCOM after-school homework program. We also have a good partnership with University of Winnipeg education faculty, with some of the profs there, Mark including, that we get student teachers to come and volunteer in our program. And I'll tell you why the benefit of this and how I see it. I see it as it's a mutually transformative experience for them. The idea being, I had so many volunteers that comes into our program and have no idea how to work with the newcomer youth. It could be biases, it could be their perspective, and it could be they didn't have the opportunity to do that. I'll tell you a story. I had a student teacher from Gimli, came to program, volunteered. Throughout the program, I've seen him, getting shocked, or just I seen him, he's not comfortable. So I pulled him aside. I said, "What's up? Like what's going on? How do you feel about the program?" He's like, "It's okay. I'm doing it." I was like, "Okay, you feel comfortable?" He said, "No." So I asked him, "Is there a newcomer, community in Gimli, and how was it?" He's like, "No, this is my first time." So the idea is that I can see the student teacher having that experience, and hopefully in 2-3 years graduating from UW and getting offered a job to work in the inner city schools, where majority of our kids go to that school, and then you can imagine how that translates into a classroom learning and teaching process. And the person would have that experience, and then he would take it to his classroom and maybe use it at some point. So the idea is that he gets his experience and exposure in working with our community, and also our kids get the educational support that they need. So that's why I call it a mutually transformative experience. Like I said, for many of the reasons that I decided to pursue education, is a lack of acknowledgement that we don't get when what we bring into our classroom, and the lack of holistic support, and then the lack. I'm gonna be honest here. The lack of teachers that represent our community. The idea is, in what way I am opening my eyes to see that I would be a teacher one day, but the only thing that I see is my community, their custodian, and their bus drivers, and any other thing. I don't see them standing in the classroom teaching me and then trying to visualize that one day I'll become this person, maybe more. I don't want my students to, like, if they pursue education, great, but the idea is that research shows that the lack of role models is a big influence in the students pursuing a career. So that's one of the things. So for me to put myself out there and taking that responsibility was a big deal for me, and I still take it as a huge responsibility. The other thing that I want to talk about is, in many cases when I went to high school, we were referred that we underperform. It's not the case. For me, it's not the case. I reflect about this. We are underserved. I'll tell you. I think instead of underperform, I would rather use underserved. It's kind of it takes a blame away from us than putting it on us. The idea that if you look at the curriculum content, had very culturally not diverse, or there's not a culturally relevant material that we can relate to. I always talk about, if George had a 3 home run in a baseball game, and do the math there. I never played baseball. I don't even know what a touchdown is how much a touchdown is, So the idea that if you expect me to do the math while I'm not aware of what the touchdown is, it's very difficult. So those things are, the language of instruction, the content, is not really there for us to relate to. And I acknowledge teachers that do a really good job in bringing, culturally relevant material into the classroom, and how for us to kind of best, in a meaningful way, to relate to what we're learning in the classroom. That being said, in many of the kids that I work with have lots of interrupted education, a lot of year gap between moving from one country to another country. So that interrupted education, I'll tell you this, every day I go to work, I work with 16, 17-year-old just doing multiplication and addition. You can understand that, at that age, doing that could be a bit problematic. So, but I don't see that he cannot catch up to his Canadian peers. It's just a matter of hard working. And in the after-school program, that's what we continue doing. We provide them the time and the opportunity and the support for them to catch up to their grade levels. So that interrupted education is a big, big problem for our kids. But I'll tell you this, These kids, the barriers and the challenge are really obvious. It's very, very obvious for people as a teacher to see and acknowledge that and then work towards that, bringing that gap. But I'll tell you the assets, where I beat down on the deficits. These kids move from country to country. In many cases, they've seen 3, 4 countries, and they speak 4 or 5 languages. That's a huge asset. That's a huge asset. Look at it, if you think about it. They're the most resilient youth that I have been lucky to work with. They'll tell me stories that I couldn't even. A 40-year-old Canadian person have not experienced what they experienced. So that gives them a huge resiliency for them to survive any challenge. And they're the most athletic persons, the most athletic students. I'll tell you this. I think the schools use that. The school says, you know what? These African boys, they're good soccer players. We're gonna get the championship this year. But as a teacher, how can you translate that hard work and competitive spirit into a classroom and bring the kids up into their academic level? That's what, as a teacher, I'm not gonna just talk about them being a good soccer players, but I'll try to bring that soccer competitive, hardworking spirit into a classroom and then get them to do some math and science and get their academics as well. So that's what I wanted to end with. Instead of focusing the deficit, there's a lot of asset that what we bring into this country. As a newcomer myself, I brought. I think I joke around that if we don't bring so many diversity and culture into our inner city Winnipeg, that place would have been a very cold and boring city. I think that's what I think of it, anyways. So I'll end with this. Michael Fulhan. I was just enjoying the speech that Keynote was doing and referring to Michael Fulhan once in a while. So it says, for public school should address the cognitive and social needs of all students with an emphasis of including those who may not been served well in the past. So with that, we might not be served well in the past, so it's a moral purpose for a teacher and a leader to address those gaps and bringing us to become a good citizens and into our society. And thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Sarafal. I just wanted to thank my colleagues for the lovely introductions and the stories that they bring and share. And we're, I think, in nature storytellers ourselves, and why we love working with children and within schools. So I wanted to sort of share my role. My name is Sue Huang, and I'm the Newcomer Service Coordinator of the Winnipeg School Division. Prior to last year, this role didn't exist. And it's an interesting sort of journey of how I came as an immigrant and refugee to Canada, and the perspectives that developed or shaped to develop who I am and the role that I take now on the Newcomer Education Coalition and within the Winnipeg School Division. So as a 4-year-old coming to Canada, I came into a very, very multicultural school and transitioned into a very, very multicultural junior high and high school. Throughout that time period, though, opposite of my colleague Surafel, I have very, very, very different experiences. And so given the environment that I was in, I was sort of offered every single opportunity. Being a newcomer student, the staff and the teachers that I worked with understood that I came with some deficits, right? Realizing that my family was probably living in poverty or below the poverty line. Knowing that about me and knowing that I had assets, they gave me every single opportunity. Sports, arts, after school programs, everything that you can think of, problems that still exist today, for example, from the WAG, information, stuff like that. So given those opportunities, I kept seeing school as a place where I belonged. I completely belonged, I was completely supported. There were times, obviously, that I experienced some racism. There's times I experienced, some challenges throughout the course of my student career. But ultimately, I was supported from the school's perspective. At home, though, what was happening was that because I was being more and more Canadianized, I was developing relationships in this Canadian context, I was losing relationships with my family. And this is difficult to speak about, and I try to at times where we have to acknowledge that the children that come into our schools, regardless of where they are or where they're from, right, they will experience a shift in the idea of who they need to be here and how they need to belong, and what that looks like for them at home, and how their parents are able to navigate through that system itself, because they also are experiencing the same culture shock, the same isolation, you know, and quite often they're doing things for our families that they're doing things for our families as far as working in very low minimum wage paying jobs that don't recognize their credentials, right? And how that takes shape in their own growth, right? So knowing this, knowing the sort of, I'll quote it, sort of broken relationship, you know, that's come through my family, I didn't realize that my journey was sort of to fix that within my own family. So even though the education system supported me, it wasn't, I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to be in social work, and I didn't know that I wanted to be in social work until I started to be able to given opportunities to work with children and work with more children and work with families. And I realized, this is the point where I need to step in, right? Where I need to, like, in order to sort of repair some of the broken relationships within my own family, I'm helping to support relationships in other families. So prior to this role in the Winnipeg School Division, for 10 years, I worked as a community support worker. So I know some of you all throughout Manitoba have sort of a role where there's a support worker that works directly with families and move parents from just participating in sort of like the student-led conferences or parent-teacher interviews, right, to actually moving them through parental involvement, where that's volunteerism or other types of support, to engagement, and then to leadership. So in that role, as community support worker, what we did was recognize, just as teachers do in classrooms, that each individual has a place and a stake in the outcome of their child's education, right? And if the more we involve them and the more we learn how to involve and engage parents, right, or the community, the better off we are in so many different ways. Being brought on to the Newcomer Education Coalition, I was able to bring that lens and bring that focus of how are the relationships that we build really, really play a key factor in what we're able to accomplish. So the Newcomer Education Coalition does exactly what Mark was saying, was we come in with our hats, you know, from those perspectives, and then we have these really, really honest conversations about what that might look like in the work that we do, and then we go back and put those hats on and actually do that work. And that forum allows us to be able to do that. So I will tell you a little story about a family that came here, sort of actually on a temporary work visa. And their idea, and most often, newcomers' perspective of Canada are extremely positive. They think that Canada's a land where you're supported and free, that it's a community of people that will just be welcoming and opening. And for the most part, as we can see how we're welcoming the new Syrian families that are coming in, that is the case in Manitoba especially, and in Winnipeg. However, there's a divide. And there's a concrete divide when people are uninformed and not understanding of the history of Canada and why we are the way we are and how we're shaped. And education plays that extremely key role. And if we don't educate our children young enough and our families early enough to understand that there is a divide. And what happens is when newcomer populations come in, they learn very quickly, depending on where they're placed or depending on who receives them and depending on what conversations they have in the very initial stages of their settlement, that divide can happen very quickly for them within the Indigenous population and within the mainstream population. It's very, very important to have these conversations very, very early on. And so they have this positive view of Winnipeg, Canada, Manitoba, right? And then they come in and they learn very quickly, number one, of course, the weather, right? But aside from the weather, they learn that there's other hostile environments out there. And those hostile environments shape the way they interact and the way that they teach their children to interact with the people in our communities. We have a responsibility, right, at this moment, because I know that with the federal and the provincial government's sort of promise to bring more and more families, refugee families, Syrian refugee families specifically, even though there's tons of refugee families from all over the world. Welcome, Abdi. I know that for people not in this room, you're not able to see that our colleague was able to attend. So this is sort of really be able to display how valuable he feels our work is. So thank you very much for coming, Abdi. But it's really important for us to have those conversations early on. So this parent came to us and she felt like there was a place. In our community school, there was a room that was completely welcoming. There was a early school play area. There was a lending library. You know, there was things and activities for her to be engaged in a very safe way, right? To sort of develop some of her skills or maybe share some of her skills. In doing that, she felt comfortable in coming every single day. And over the course of these conversations, she learned that Canada had a history, and it broke her heart. It really did. It broke her heart, and she said, I don't understand why that's happening, right? Or why that my friends, the people that I've met in this room, have, you know, the same concerns, you know, that other people have all over the world. I don't know that of Canada. And had it not been for that safe space for her to be able to say these things, we wouldn't be able to have those conversations. So what the Newcomer Education Coalition aims to do as part of some of the research that we're doing is to really look at parental involvement and how that really affects the educational outcomes of students. If we're able to have these conversations early on with our newcomer families about, you know, why yet they may see what they see in our cities and our communities, right? We're able to sort of navigate those relationships. We're able to bring those relationships together and then work together because mutually, our Indigenous population and our newcomer population have the most struggles as far as what we deem as deficits. What we really want to be able to is build relationships early enough so that we see assets, right? We want to be able to build relationships early enough so that parents don't not only feel that they can participate, be involved, but also be engaged and then lead and become, you know, teachers in our social workers, psychologists, you know, administrators in our school division, in our community and throughout Manitoba. The other piece about engaging parents and the community is that when families start to build a network for themselves in settlement, they really grow tenfold. They don't feel isolated. They feel like their gifts are honored and valued, and that those connections with parental involvement actually take shape in the home as well. And so that's where I come back to the initial part of my story is that had my parents had the ability, you know, to have the time to be able to be involved because they were working at jobs, you know, that they didn't they didn't want to be at, but they knew they had to make, you know, a living in order for us to be able to have this better life. Had they been involved in any other way, I think that our relationship wouldn't have been as challenging, right? And so as you know, as we go forward in my personal relationship with my family, right, and the relationships that we understand that our students are having with their parents, right, if we go forward in knowing that or keeping that in the back of our minds, we can probably help to sort of navigate how we can help build those relationships, if that makes any sense. Yeah, so thank you for your time. I don't know if you would like to come up, Abdi, if you're feeling a little, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he's got some perfect timing. So I just wanted to introduce you to my colleague Abdi, and he will carry on with what the coalition is doing and other perspectives. Thanks very much.
Good morning. I couldn't stand the prospect of not being here. I have a very bad flu. I hope I don't infect anyone. It's been running for the last 3 days. So I took Advil at 7 this morning, so hoping that things will change, and I felt a little bit stressed, so I decided to rush here. Some of the work, I'm not sure if some of the things may have been covered before me or not. One of the things that's important to us as a coalition, the Newcomer Educational Coalition, is the issue of having teachers who are certified, qualified teachers who can teach EL. Thank you. So I think many of us know the issue of certification of teachers. Do people do understand this? Yeah, EAL, everyone. So we as a coalition think it's very unfair to have students who are learning who are EAL students in our schools be taught by teachers who are not certified to teach EAL in high schools, junior high, and sometimes elementary. I think this is quite unfair. Many of us, if our children were in a school where a teacher who was not well equipped to teach them, we will not be able to sleep. So we as a coalition think and believe that because most of the newcomer parents, number one, are not politically engaged. They do not engage with the school boards because they have not yet woken up to the prospect of the political engagement. Number one, they are not engaged with the schools. Number two, and they do not understand because they're struggling with a lot of other integration issues. They're able to understand what their kids are going through. From our knowledge, many of the EL teachers are passionate teachers about helping the kids. Teachers who are very passionate about helping these kids, who are really interested in the success of these kids. However, as educators in this field, we fail these teachers by not providing them with the tools that they need to be able to respond to the needs of these kids. So it is really, really important that we wake up to this and take a role in introducing a certification program with EL as a teachable. This is our goal. And I think as a coalition, the other day I was speaking to someone a teacher who is a member of TIL Manitoba, and I was saying, we will have a program to certify EL teachers as teachable in the next 3 years. I'm confident, I said. I'm very confident we will have it. And she said, Abdi, you're overconfident. Optimistic. And I said, I can't see why all people, all of us in the education sector should sit and be unfair to these kids, because it's the main reason why the graduation rates for kids who are in EL is very low. It's the main reason as to why it's the main reason as to why kids in EL drop out of schools. So this is something that's quite important for us, and for me, for example, and as a coalition, we wish that people in your level and people in your roles take this up, because I am getting to learn the education sector. I'm not a teacher. I have not worked in the education system. I have just been a youth worker for a long time. And many of the things that I've realized from the perspective of youth who are struggling with the school system, who are dropping out of schools, who are saying the school is not a welcoming environment for me, or EL teachers who are really struggling and are looking for things outside the box to be able to respond to the needs of the kids. So from my understanding, there are a lot of hands in the education sector. There are a lot of stakeholders. So my hand has 5 fingers. The education sector has so many fingers that are eating the same food. So I think those fingers need to collaborate on how the food can satisfy them by responding to the needs of these kids appropriately. The next thing that I was going to talk about is we're also concerned why it has taken so long to produce a curriculum for teaching EAL in schools. I understand a draft was made 12 years ago, but it's been sitting there. So as people who are interested in the success of kids in schools, we need to be able to wake up and demand something. Again, I'm 100% sure if it was a Canadian kid whose parents were engaged with the system, the parent will not sleep with their kid learning through a system where there was no curriculum, where there were no benchmarks, all these kind of things. So I may be overstating certain things, but I think as a parent, my kids are in elementary school right now. If my kids were new in junior high, I will be fighting the school boards. And I'm willing to fight on behalf of the newcomer parents, and I think you guys need to be able to wake up to this fact that we need to have something that guides the teachers in responding to the needs of EL kids. The next thing is something around inclusion, exclusion, human rights, racism. We are dealing with we have, as a youth worker and someone who has worked with youth for a long time, some of the things that I've struggled with is a Muslim girl who wears the hijab, who has been told you must wear pants in the gym. And the parents are saying, no, we don't want a girl to wear pants in the gym. Or a Muslim girl who wears the hijab and who has been told your hijab is risky to be worn in the shops in the home economics class. So for me, I'm perturbed because there are a lot of countries that are Muslims, women wear hijab, and they do sewing. So it's because we do not understand things that we do not understand, we do not make accommodation for it. So these are some things that we need to wake up to. Issues around sports, for example. Newcomer kids, mostly kids who are new to this country, are interested in soccer. And when they come here, we bombard them with sports and things that you do not understand, which kills their self-esteem. So they come here, you push them into hockey, you push them into basketball, you push them into football. They have no clue what this is, and they suck at it. Seriously. So it kills their self-esteem. So, okay, good 5 minutes. I can't be with it. So to uplift the self-esteem of the kids, we need to look at helping the kids excel in things that they know. These kids are very interested in soccer. They love soccer. So I think we need to make an opportunity for kids to do these things that they like, not things that are popular in Canada. I used to run a program for youth. We used to run a hockey program. In the days, I was also thinking, integrate, learn what's going on in Canada. I was telling the kids, and it was very difficult. So we enrolled the kids in soccer program. We registered them in the Winnipeg Youth Soccer Association League for youth. And because the parents don't have cars to drive the kids to tournaments, we were able to make them, all their games be played on home ground. So the other teams can come. And these kids, they played 12 matches in the season. They drew one and won 11. At the end of the season, they were like, I'm done with soccer. Now I can tackle hockey, football. Some of those kids, I know 2 of them are in the provincial team in basketball. 2 of them are in provincial team in football. So if that didn't happen for them, then they will not succeed. So I think we need to think outside the box to be able to provide an opportunity for kids to build their self-esteem, not to kill their self-esteem. The other issues, things around parents and schools. Sue might have talked about it, but some of the things that we struggle with is schools are not inclusive. They do not provide an opportunity for parents to. They do not open parents to schools. I grew up in Kenya. Growing up in Kenya, the only time when my parents came to school is when I was in trouble. Seriously. And the perception is that you go to school when your kid is in trouble. So we need to be able to introduce newcomer parents into schools, bring them into schools. There's a terrible issue about perception by parents because the issue of the responsibility to report. Tell me when it's 1 minute so that I can take off. 1 more minute, okay. So every time, parents mistrust teachers. because they believe that teachers work against them to report them to CFS. So if a kid is unable to feed at home and they don't want the food, kids intimidate the parents because they say, I'm going to report you to the teacher, and the teacher is going to report you to CFS. So we need to be able to build a positive relationship between parents and teachers. In my opinion, it is better for teachers to have an evening with their parents than continuously teach from 9 to 3 o'clock. Teaching should not end at 3 o'clock. We should be able to open an opportunity for parents to involve, especially newcomers. In some schools, they send a newsletter. Nobody reads it. A newsletter, a paper with information. Okay, I'm done. And it should be done in so many languages. Victoria Albert School does it in 6 different languages. And kids, parents get it. They read it. So I'll end it there, and then maybe the rest we can address with questions. Thank you for cutting my neck.